We're hopping back in. This is our next run. We wanted to get together a little post Andrew Trebbing, Underworld Champion.
That's right, baby.
Celebration here going on.
We have a champion on the podcast.
Whatever. No big deal.
No big.
I didn't bring my title belt, but I'll bring it next time.
We need to figure out how to turn some people's teams into championship winners with certain beasts of teams like Dane's right now.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to take him down, guys. This can't continue to happen.
That trade, man, though, he's gonna be tough to beat for the next couple of years.
Yeah, it has been an exciting offseason for Jersey Dynasty football.
A lot of trading. It's awesome.
Keep them coming. Does Dane have Gurley?
Yes.
Dane does have Gurley.
Okay, that's
Saquon.
perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Gurley's our first topic tonight. We wanted to talk about how having an injured freak on your team makes you want to sell, buy, freak out for 6 months not knowing what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I know personally I'm not getting Gurley yet. I'm not buying him yet. Some others might, but I think his value is going to continue to fall. Like the whole sentiment out there right now is, he's now turning into a second rounder in redrafts.
Yeah, which is crazy. That's so low. That's so low for who was probably the best or second best fantasy option last year.
Easily.
Yeah.
And that value could plunge even further if you hear him missing training camp or even further. I think OTAs,
which I think
of
he
course.
He probably will miss training camp. At least part of it. Why would they risk it, you know? The problem with his value right now is it's just so based on uncertainty. Like we have no idea whether he'll start and just be himself and be fine for the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then when he's 7 years old, he can't walk, he has no knees, or he needs a knee replacement or whatever he needs. It's just the uncertainty of it. You don't know whether you should buy or sell because you have that fear, especially in Dynasty, where you trade a guy and then he ends up blowing up and you're like, I'm miserable, it's the worst. Or if you hold him and he ends up not playing at all, you're like, I screwed myself, why didn't I trade him? So it's tough, you know. If I'm owning Gurley right now, I don't think I can sell him just because I don't think I'm going to get the value I want for him. If I can get good value for him, if I can find someone that's willing to buy and pay the price, I would sell.
Yes, agreed.
I think it's in the perception of where you actually took him, right? I mean, if we're talking a net new, fresh Dynasty league where you drafted him, yeah, you're going to have a lot of value from that perspective. So, that's one thing you certainly have to consider. I think, though, as an owner, you can't really panic on it. You just have to embrace the sweat and just keep pushing through. Keep digging.
Yeah. Unless your name's Dane, then panic sell him.
Yeah. Panic sell him to me. I will take him. Yeah, I'm buying Gurley at the price that he's at right now. I mean, if he's in redrafts in the second round or in dynasties in like the third or second round, I'm buying him every time.
I'm waiting a little bit more and then I'm gonna buy because the Rams last year they didn't play any of their key players in the preseason all the way through week 4. I expect them to do the same thing this year. I think Gurley's on that. Fear should grow on Gurley owners, so there might be a better buying opportunity as we get into some weird news in August.
Well, and then that's going to be an interesting situation where they start, and they're going to have Darrell Henderson play a lot in the preseason, I assume, and people are going to freak out because they're already freaking out over him now. He's the hot buy, if you're following all the charts in Dynasty, he's going so high now. He's in the first round in a lot of drafts. We probably value him around an early second, late first in Dynasty rookie Dynasty drafts, but he's going to keep going up. His value is just going to keep peaking.
I think the low point that's going to reach for Gurley is what if he goes on the PUP list and misses the first 6 weeks of the season? Kudos to Dane for having a stacked running back core within his team. I think that's the backbone and the bread and butter of his team.
Absolutely.
And as volatile as the running back situation is in the NFL, where Gurley was the peak top 2 running back within the league, and now you're looking at him drop now to these mid levels. I mean, what if that whole Rams backfield turns into a running back by committee approach? It's going to be devastating to a lot of Rams owners to see who the actual bell cow is. Granted that Gurley is making all this money, that you'd still think of him as the horse.
Yeah, and it'll come down to if he's going to get that goal line work, which he had been dominating before. if they end up going elsewhere for that, his value is going to go down.
I don't think we're going to find out what's really going on with his knee ever. They hid it from us in the Super Bowl, and they're not being penalized appropriately for it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect to have any knowledge really about what's going on with his knee.
That's a crazy situation to me. The fact that it was so obvious. Like,
yeah,
they're like, oh no, he's fine. He's playing. No injuries, not questionable, nothing. And then you're in the Super Bowl and like C.J. Anderson's playing and he's just sitting watching. Like, and then it comes out like months later. Like, yeah, he was actually here. We're like, yeah, no duh. Like, obviously.
I think the thing is too. You look at the entire team and that entire infrastructure. C.J. Anderson's not there anymore. I think they traded up to get Darrell Henderson. Did they, or did they just draft him right there in the 3rd round?
I think they traded up for him.
They traded up, yeah.
Which automatically signals
early,
it automatically signals a flare to me. And I almost look at Gurley now and I'm like, is he the next Jay Ajayi, who had the same degenerative knee problem in his career? And yet, granted, Jay Ajayi is only 25 years old. Doesn't have a team right now. So you wonder the wear and tear on Gurley's body. And he had knee troubles going back to his days dating in Georgia that many people thought that he overcome. What's going to be the next step in the next progression of how we evaluate Todd Gurley?
The big difference between Gurley and Ajayi is Ajayi is a free agent and Gurley has a 3-year guaranteed contract. So they're going to have to pay him either way, I'm pretty sure. I think they might be able to cut him loose eventually, but I think he's got to get paid for at least 2 or 3 years based on from what I remember from his contract. Yeah, that's the big difference. And if they run him into the ground, they'll run him into the ground, but he'll still see touches at some point. It's just how many, when, it's going to be tough to say on a fantasy perspective.
My other concern has to do with Henderson coming in, whether it's him or Malcolm Brown. And it sounds like from McVay, he's saying we're gonna not overdo our stud running back. So maybe it's
passing down
70% Gurley and 30% these other guys, whereas opposed to, what was it, 2 years ago, it was just Gurley,
90,
Gurley,
10.
Some insane amount. The value of the production is going to go down. We all know that. The question is that a drop to 15 fantasy points per week to 15 to 20 as opposed to the 20 plus that you were expecting before? So the next guy that I've had a lot of ownership over the previous 3 years is Cam Newton. Everybody has noticed that I've been trying to sell for some time now. I have sold in some leagues. This is not trying to sell him now.
But he is for sale.
But this brings up it brings up a question in the sense of we have these quarterbacks who approach age 30. There's an analytics curve where quarterbacks start to fall off after that age range. There are players who don't
defy
fall
the
off.
odds.
Yeah, that are elite, crazy, freakish. Not Andrew Luck, but other quarterbacks like Tom Brady, Carson Wentz. It's hard because Cam was so freakish, like a top 5 QB for so many years.
Yeah.
Last year he was still a top 10 until his injuries kicked in or whatever. Is this the time to sell or buy Cam? It's not clear cut. He could be still a good value over these next couple of years. This could be the end.
So he's kind of a different quarterback than a lot of these guys that have been able to last. Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, even Aaron Rodgers. These guys that are in their who's the Saints quarterback?
Drew Brees.
Yes,
Mid-30s up.
Yeah, 35, 30 plus that are playing well. But the problem is that Cam Newton's a different style of quarterback. He runs a ton. He's big and he runs over players. And these other quarterbacks, they slide. They get out. They don't take these hits. So it's going to be interesting to see because Michael Vick fell off right around this age a little bit. He ended up playing a little bit past 30, but you could tell there was a big difference between the way he was when he was in his late 20s, mid-20s, to when he was in his early 30s. So
if we could insert the Jim Cramer sound bit of sell, 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 that's what I think you have to do with Cam Newton at this point. This guy is a former MVP, 3 years removed from participating in his first Super Bowl and Super Bowl 50. Didn't win the Super Bowl, of course. There's been a lot of turmoil within ownership and changes within that organization over these last 3 years. The owner had a scandal and had to sell the team. There's new ownership. They've had turnover in GM. Ron Rivera's job most likely could be on the line if Cam is healthy this year. You don't know what new management or what new situation is going to come in and evaluate Cam as a solution. I think that's one of the things you certainly have to take into consideration. But over these last 3 years since that Super Bowl team, they haven't really drafted well, and they haven't really put a lot of complementary pieces outside of Christian McCaffrey around this team. This is a big year for DJ Moore. This is a big year for Curtis Samuel to really just define those loads to make sure that to take the burden off Cam's chest, and probably the last big year for Greg Olsen potentially.
Yeah, they definitely got to take a lot of loads off of his chest.
Yes.
I get that.
You got to put the ball in a wheelbarrow and go for it, guys.
Yeah, I mean, so like one of the perceptions that people have about Cam Newton is that he's fragile, he's always injured. But if you look back, he hasn't played less than 14 games in any of the seasons that he's played in. He's been around. He's been playing through the injuries, and we'll see if this is the beginning of his decline. But I think, and it is a shoulder injury that came up recently, which is really obviously very scary for quarterbacks. But they also said he should be participating in the preseason, and he should be participating in drills. So I think he'll be around. Yeah, it's tough to say because he's always been he's been really a top 5 quarterback for pretty much every year he's been in the league until last year, and we're wondering if it was an outlier last year. I mean, he had the least amount of touchdowns last year rushing, least amount of rushing yards last year, and maybe that's a sign of he's got to move towards passing more. He can't take these hits anymore. Or maybe it's an outlier. I mean, the season he was that top quarterback, he had 10 rushing touchdowns and 35 passing touchdowns. I don't think he'll reach those marks, but I also expect him to do better than he did last year.
It can also be a side effect of McCaffrey being such a significant part of their running game, so that can take away from Cam, and maybe that's the standard going forward. That can also be a little bit of piece of the pie. A big part for me too is they haven't extended his contract or made a new contract for him. After this year, they can cut bait and move on from him. And if somebody's your franchise QB from now on out, if you go into next year and you haven't re-signed Cam, he's going to go chase the money. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think in the end it'll come down to whether Cam actually wants to stay in Carolina or not. I think the team will give him a contract. They'll give him the money because if you have that quarter, he got you to the Super Bowl. He has the skills. I don't think you can just cut bait and move on to just some random next quarterback. I don't think, and they did draft Will Grier, which is great, but I don't think he's going to be that guy either.
But that 3rd round draft pick kind of reveals Carolina being like, hey, we need to be prepared. This doesn't, hit on our ego of the quarterback as much, but it's still a 3rd rounder. You could have grabbed somebody to compete this year rather than a backup just in case Cam doesn't stay with you.
I could see the Panthers doing the same thing that the Redskins ultimately did with Kirk Cousins. He goes on the franchise tag for 2 more years.
That's a good
without
point.
making the commitment to that long-term commitment, and we'll pay you as an average top 5, QB, and then move on the rest of your years somewhere else where there's whether it be somewhere like a Tennessee or a Tampa Bay if those situations don't work out. But the ultimate thing is, if Cam Newton isn't a runner, is he still valued as a top 5, top 10 QB? Do you trust him from in the pocket to win a game?
Probably not top 5, but probably still top 10 is probably where I would put him if you're not relying on the running.
He
as
runs
much.
the offense. He's a leader. I think in the end, I don't think Cam Newton as just a passer will cut it. But I think there will always be that threat of him running, even if he doesn't actually end up running as much as he does. Michael Vick was kind of like that towards the end, where they always had that threat, but he had lost a step. He wasn't running as much. He still had a rocket arm. Not necessarily always accurate, but he was able to still play and not run as much. So I think just that having that threat makes defenses have to play differently.
So would you take Kirk Cousins or Cam Newton right now?
For me, it's Cam Newton. I still trusted Kirk. I mean, last year he was everyone was going in, he was going to be a top 5 quarterback. This is the guy. And then he, kind of was just nothing spectacular. And when you're looking for quarterbacks, you're not looking for average. Because if I'm looking for Kirk Cousins, there's 10 different quarterbacks I could get at that exact same, point value. So for me, I'm looking for that home run. So I'm still going Cam.
I'll take Kirk Cousins. And the reason why I'll take Kirk Cousins is because of what they have around Kirk Cousins. Minnesota upgraded its offensive line this past offseason. They heavily invested in the draft and the positions. Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, they just extended Kyle Rudolph. There is a strong offensive core around Kirk Cousins that gives me 2 to 3 years. That makes me feel like, hey, I have a secure structure, at least knowing with Kirk for the next 2 years than I potentially do with the next 2 years of Cam. Because the worst case scenario for Cam is he could go down the Andrew Luck path where he may play this year and then have his shoulder surgery in the offseason and miss a full year on top of that. And ownership has come out and said if that was the case, they would be all for it as well previously this offseason.
The good thing for Cam, though, is he doesn't snowboard, so he's not risking shoulder injury over and over.
He's a great fashion person, though.
That's true, yeah. If it was a fashion draft, I'd take Cam Newton.
30-year-old Michael Vick or Cam Newton right now?
I'd probably take Michael Vick just because the way Cam Newton played, he like barrels over people. Like he goes in and hurts himself. Vick was elusive enough that he didn't necessarily take all those huge hits. It's kind of just his legs kind of gave out. He just kind of lost a step. So I'd probably take Vick. That's close.
One last one, Ben Roethlisberger or Cam Newton?
It's Cam for me, just based on age. I mean, Big Ben's great, but I mean, he's got maybe 2 or 3 seasons left.
But I also view Cam as only having 2 or 3 seasons left.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
That's kind of why I'm asking it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I'd still go Cam.
I would take Ben only because look at that division Carolina's in. Atlanta's gotten better this offseason. The Saints are still the Saints with Drew Brees. You know, Tampa Bay now with Bruce Arians and Jameis for one last go before they potentially rebuild. I think they're clearly the 3rd or 4th best team in that division overall when you're looking at the talent surrounding them. And I just don't see Cam making it through a potential season to get them over the hump, even into the playoffs.
Well, but then you also have to consider that if they are the 3rd or 4th best team, they're going to be behind in all those games. They'll be passing a lot, which is means fantasy points for him. Maybe not from an actual win perspective, but from fantasy, a lot of times those garbage time points are the difference between winning a week and losing a week.
Damn you, Blake Bortles.
Bortles.
If we made NFL players into WWE superstars, who would Cam Newton be?
Oh, man. It would have to be a wrestler that was always injured for a little bit, and he'd come back, and you're like, oh, man, I like watching this guy wrestle, but then he'd get injured again. You're like, oh, okay. All right.
I have 2 people in mind, one past and one present.
Okay.
The past person being the model Rick Martel. From the fashion standpoint alone.
That's good.
And then the second person from the present would clearly be Velveteen Dream.
Okay.
Oh, just from the
100%.
flamboyantness of it all and the fashion outfits. Because, even when you hear Cam go over the top, it's just like, I'm like, Velveteen.
We should keep going on this. So for the wrestlers for I think we have an audience for this. I think our listeners will enjoy this.
Todd Gurley.
Ultimate Warrior.
Wow. That's...
Listen.
It sounds like you're shitting on him.
Yeah. Injury prone. Warrior's been in and out, and it was his entire career. I'm not saying Gurley's going to die off the face of the earth, unfortunately, like Ultimate Warrior did. But I think he has a reckless, abandoned style almost that I can sometimes consider like Marshawn Lynch when he runs. You feel his impact whenever he's out there, though. And that's the way I look at Todd Gurley. Short burst and immediate impact.
So for me, it's Stone Cold Steve Austin because he, dominated wrestling for forever. And then he got run over by a car and his neck can't turn anymore. And he kept wrestling after that. And he was good for part of that, but he still played to the crowd and he still did his time, but it just wasn't the same.
I don't have one for him because you guys used my answer.
was it
Ultimate Warrior?
I'm
a huge Ultimate Warrior fan. Tyreek Hill.
So for Tyreek Hill, I have someone that it seemed like he was always going to get in trouble and it was always a problem. When he wrestled, he was good, but then, he always had his issues. Jeff Hardy.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Because it was just always like a matter of time. You're like, something's going to get some. Oh, yep. He wrestled Sting drunk. And
I have a weird one.
God.
Yeah. I have a weird one with it, but he's no longer wrestling for WWE. Maybe not as good of a wrestler, but Enzo Amore. I feel like this is eventually happening.
How you doing?
He's going to be booted.
Yeah, I like it.
So the one I would go with is actually nostalgic because I feel like it fits his entire career is Brian Pillman. And the reason being is back in his WCW days, he was known as Flying Brian Pillman. Always the high flyer, always the one that's, doing the unique things that you didn't see in that time period. Tyreek Hill is known as the cheetah and stuff for how fast he does, how much he stretches the field. So I thought he had a unique presence to him. And then when he went to WWE in the mid-90s, with the Hart Foundation and such, he was known as the loose cannon, to include his high flying. And you have the entire gun incident that happened and took place. And I'm just like, yeah, that'd be something Tyreek Hill would do to get arrested amongst all the domestic violence stuff.
Point a gun at an interviewer, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah. You can't play football anymore. Sorry.
Antonio Brown.
It's interesting because my first thought was $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase because of how much money, business is booming. He always has a slogan. He markets himself. Everybody's got a price when you're the $1 Million Man. Antonio Brown would go up on a stage and say, hey, I'm rich and you're not, and throw his money and just his, panderism out there to those people.
So for me, it's Brock Lesnar. He goes where the money is. He does whatever he wants, and everyone just caters to what he wants. One. UFC is just like, okay, we'll pay you. You did drugs. Okay, whatever. WWE's like, yeah, you're terrible, but whatever. We'll give you the belt for years and years and years. And he keeps showing up and he keeps winning. So we'll see if that's the case. I don't know what the future holds for Antonio Brown and for Brock Lesnar. I think Brock Lesnar will probably still keep wrestling for a while and keep winning, but I think Antonio Brown is on his way down. That's where they're kind of different.
I like a wrestler, not now, but in the past, Triple H. It reminds me a lot of Triple H. This is the guy who just dominates, and people hate it, but they respect it.
Yeah, that's
they might not respect his personality. Antonio Brown.
Now
it's
they
a little
like
off, but
yeah.
but I like to think of old school Triple H as he was hated much more back then. Saquon Barkley. All together,
I think
at the same time on the count of three.
All right, I got mine.
One, two, three.
John
Cena.
Cena.
I want to hear from AJ to see if he agrees with us on the.
I think he agrees.
On the John Cena.
100%.
There's no question. I mean, Saquon Barkley is the best asset in fantasy football, and John Cena is the best wrestler of all time.
So speaking of Cheetah earlier, Tyreek Hill, we're getting into the Cheetah, Matt Markoff's team.
Backstory, Matt one time said he would fight a cheetah in a cage and he would win because cheetahs are built for speed and ambush, I believe was the terminology.
And we were trying to find out how much it would cost to rent a cheetah.
To fight him.
To fight Matt in a cage.
Yes. Matt was very sure of himself, and I'm sure he still is sure of himself now that he would win a fight against a cheetah in a cage.
The cheetah would definitely still win.
Probably.
If three guys in the movie The Hangover can't take a tiger, then I can't trust Markoff against a cheetah.
I mean, allegedly, according to Matt, cheetahs are smaller and are for speed and ambush. So if he was able to trap him, he would be able to corral him and would destroy the cheetah in a fight. So I'd still pay to see it. I don't know about you guys.
I would, in a heartbeat.
But let's look at the Cheetahs team. Should we start at the quarterbacks?
Yep, let's start with QBs.
The mainstay of any Matt Markoff fantasy team, redraft, dynasty, any format, Tom Brady. In every
He'll
league.
draft it well ahead of where he's supposed to go.
But he wants him, And I mean, it looks like Brady probably might stay another 2 years. If Edelman's signing a 2-year contract, I expect Brady to be there another 2 years.
Hopefully he can play to 45 like Andrew Luck will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady's his value is not there anymore in Dynasty, but I think he's still going to put up 2 very good years.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully.
I think Markoff thinks that Giselle comes with the team as you draft Brady. And
he wishes.
That doesn't happen here.
So, all right. So he's got Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, and Jacoby Brissett. Rivers, I like, and I think he ended up getting him from Dan for like a 3rd or 4th round pick.
I think that's a great pickup.
Great value.
I'm happy with Rivers and Brady as his 2 main QBs.
Very solid backup. Brissett probably could get cut.
Brissett's not getting cut this year. He's going to be a free agent next year, and there's people thinking that he could be starter potential still.
Right, understand that, Colts homer, but this is a Dynasty League roster that I think he's easily cuttable at the moment. I think you take on other QBs if you're going to have a third one. I'm sure there's ones on waivers that I would rather have than Jacoby Brissett right now for potential play.
Yeah,
I can think of one.
Yeah, I think does this list have his draft picks as well? Did he draft quarterback?
Oh, no.
He did not draft a quarterback.
I should look that up.
He did not draft a quarterback. So his 3 QBs are Brady Rivers and Jacoby Brissett.
Now. I like Brissett for potentially in 2 years, but I don't want to hold on to him on a dynasty roster.
I think it's just a matter of where he has room to make cuts. So, Markov hasn't adjusted his team yet for those rookies that come in. I mean, he has 4 players I see off the top of my head that are free agents and not with any other teams at the moment. So I think that is one thing to definitely consider, though.
But going along with the Colts theme, we look at his receivers, and he has T.Y. Hilton and Devin Funchess.
Bunches of Funchess and Hilton. Hilton, I think, still has at least two solid years left before they make a transition potentially. Hilton has been a great value add when Luck's on the field with him, so I love him from a wide receiver 1 standpoint. There's some interesting pieces he has at wide receiver. Tyrell Williams, now going from the Chargers to the Raiders, gives him a lot of flexibility and is probably the number 2 receiver in Oakland right now with Jordy Nelson's imminent retirement with the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, the Oakland wide receiver situation is going to be very interesting going forward to see where it's going to be interesting to see where they end up passing the ball. Brown is going to command a lot of targets, and I mean Tyrell Williams I like. I think he has the potential. He showed himself before he got this contract in Oakland that he could play. It'll just be whether or not he has enough targets to
The
go
way
around.
Matt's roster looks right now, though, it looks like he's going to be starting Hilton and probably Tyrell Williams. Maybe Funchess if stuff happens with Funchess, but a lot of those other guys are all speculative right now. Maybe Doxson if he hits, but he's struggling at receiver depth.
There's a lot of question marks on that team that I'm not sure where he ends up going. He did not draft, it looks like, my sheet is a little weird, but it looks like he did not draft any wide receivers. He took David Montgomery, Benny Snell is who I'm seeing, and I think those were his only draft picks.
I just want to go to the Eagles truther here for a minute. Where does Aguilar fit in that offense now moving forward?
He's on a contract year, so it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, he had a lot of targets the first couple weeks when he was the top receiver, I guess, at that point, but they have a lot of targets that are going to be going around. I think he'll start over Arcega-Whiteside to start the year. I think he'll probably fill that role, that slot role, I think. So I think the targets potentially could be there. He could have a good year this year, and if it's great, maybe who knows going forward. But there's a lot of targets, and they like to spread it around.
DJ Chark is a guy that he's coming into his 2nd year now. I think we're going to find out a lot about Chark on the Jaguars. So if I was in Matt's shoes, I'd be trying to hold on to Chark right now, unless somebody's going to overpay, but see what's going to get produced, because he was drafted as a 2nd rounder, if I recall right, and he was expected to be their WR1 next to. Yeah. Depending on Marquise Lee, but Marquise Lee's kind of like in a weird way.
This will be an interesting year for them, because it's going to come down to who Nick Foles wants to throw to, who he likes throwing to. I think it could be Chark, it could be Keelan Cole, it could be Marquise Lee, could be Dede Westbrook. I mean, there's a lot of options there, or maybe they end up spreading it around a lot. But I expect Jacksonville to have one standout wide receiver that's going to be ahead of them all, and I honestly have no idea which one it'll be. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that have make it or break it years on his wide receivers, from Doxson, Aguilar, Mohamed Sanu's probably last year in Atlanta, potentially, I believe.
He had a good year. Atlanta's, I think, going to have a great passing year this year. The question is if it's going to be going to Sanu or if Calvin Ridley's going to fill a lot of those targets. But I mean, he quietly had a very good year the last couple of years. So I think I like his wide receiver depth, because I think if you look at 6 of these guys, if 1 or 2 of them hits big, his receiver core will be decent. But he really needs a wide receiver too. He needs to find a way to trade and get a receiver that can fill in day one and get in top 25 points.
Running backs, he has David Johnson, Sony Michel, Carlos Hyde, Spencer Ware, and Jacquizz Rodgers,
and David Montgomery as well.
Montgomery and Benny Snell.
Benny Snell, yeah. I mean, that's a good core. David Johnson, Sony Michel, David Montgomery. Those 3 are, to me, a very, very solid running back to start with. The rest of them, Jacquizz Rodgers, probably cut. Spencer Ware, is he even on a team? Is he in Kansas City?
Spencer Ware's in Indianapolis.
Okay, yeah. So he's probably a cut as well. Carlos Hyde, I don't mind holding on to for a year or two. I mean, he's in Kansas City, right?
Yeah, he could overtake Damian Williams, even though there's a lot of Williams hype right now.
Yes.
Easily. I mean, Carlos Hyde is a freak. Like he can play when he's healthy and when he's getting his chance. I remember watching him, and he can play. So he could easily take over that role, and I think he could fill in Kansas City really well.
Sony Michel is a concern for me. One, as a Pats fan, I try not to be biased on guys. So when I start to feel bad about a Pats player, I get really concerned. I know his value's dropped a lot recently. I would not be selling him right now. I'd be trying to buy him if I was somebody else looking for a running back and needed one. If you do need a running back, you got to try and get someone like this.
I think it's interesting because you obviously see the investment of Michel as a first-round pick within the Pats organization. I think the interesting thing is I think New England will lean on the offensive rushing attack this year, especially with Isaiah Wynn coming off the torn ACL. That'll be playing left tackle, who is another former first-round pick. The interesting thing to me is there's so many guys in that backfield. You know, part of the reason why I dealt James White for what I did was because I do believe in James White. I just
Humble brag.
Humble brag. I do believe in James White.
You got James White?
I traded him to Babetsky for a second and third round pick.
Okay.
Babetsky ripped him off.
Yes, completely.
Just kidding.
In my opinion, though, you see it all the people back there between Michel, Burkhead, James White, Damian Harris.
I think Burkhead gets cut this year.
You really think Burkhead?
Yeah.
They'll move on just from the injury riddled.
They have too many
people to feed. I mean, if that's the case, hey, even better scenario for Michel, but you wouldn't bring in another running back from a back-to-back year. And I don't know if they view Damian Harris in that LeGarrette Blount role at the goal line potentially too. That could take away Michel's carries.
Yeah, I mean, so the interesting thing for me for Michel is that if you're in a goal line situation and you have all the running backs at your disposal in New England, for me, you hand it off to Damian Harris. He seems to be like going to fill the LeGarrette Blount role, that 15 touchdown, 30 rushes guy that's just, okay, we're inside the 10, give it to Damian Harris, he'll pound it in. And then on the passing downs, it's who you can give it to, James White. It's like, okay, so if you're running it with Damian Harris and you're passing it to James White, where does Sonny Michel fit in? So I think he takes a step back this year. I would not buy him at this point. I'd be trying to sell him while his value is still there. The Patriots are also so unpredictable that he could easily, and they score so many touchdowns that it may not even matter. He may still get his opportunities. But for me, if you can get good value, I'm selling. Yeah, I wouldn't go out and buy him. But yeah, that's where I would be.
Yeah, this is where I think we're different on it. It's just the first round pedigree of the draft by the Patriots to me is gonna hold up over time. But if I want to buy it, I want it to drop a little bit more. And I think sentiment is falling on him, so it should fall a little bit more.
Yeah, I think my issue is that I think it's going to be a big running back by committee. And they threw the ball to running backs a lot last year, and Michel they didn't throw it to very much. So that worries me a lot, that it's just going to be the James White show for the scat back. And then, Damian Harris will get some touches, and, whoever ends up being that fourth running back, if it is Burkhead, they'll get some touches. They like to spread the ball around, so that's my worry.
This is why I hate having players on a team I cheer for on my fantasy team, because I know I'm not going to get a clear 100% accurate read. So, I'll get a decent amount, but
right.
I can tell right now I'm misvaluing Sony Michel relative to certain things.
He got a lot of points last year, and he missed the first couple games. So, he's going in as their running back. But I just worry in a half PPR or PPR league that James White is also going to cut into those numbers a lot.
I think obviously David Johnson is great. He's going to be his main starter. If Matt is starting to approach rebuild mode, or if he's in it right now, this is probably the year
to sell David Johnson.
And still get insane value.
Yeah.
To really focus on that rebuild.
I think he can start the season with David Johnson, and then if he falls out of the playoffs, he can find a suitable person that's willing to pay for David Johnson and sell him there. That's probably the stance that I would take.
Price, though.
Yeah, that's the stance I would take. Because going into the season, he still killed it last year, and his offense was garbage, and he was still, I think, a top running back one. in like easily the worst offense in the league. And I think that offense is going to get better. I think he's going to get a lot of passes. The question is if Kyler Murray ends up rushing a lot instead of David Johnson, were those situations where instead they were dumping it off to David Johnson, is Kyler Murray just going to run with it? We don't really know.
It's an interesting situation for Johnson because he's entering into a new offense with Cliff Kingsbury where it's a spread-style offense from the college days. They didn't really make any improvements on that offensive line, but more running lanes can be opened with him with a mobility quarterback back there with Kyler Murray now compared to Josh Rosen. I'd be interested to see how Cliff's going to use him in different looks. Are they going to split him out wide or put him in the slot against the linebacker for some potential mismatches? Because that's really the heart of where the spread offense stands, is finding that mismatch within the defense. But I think he'll be solid for this year and maybe one more after that.
Tight ends, it looks like he's got some work. He has a startable one in Kyle Rudolph, potentially Hayden Hurst too, but Baltimore tight ends is a mess now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And Nick Vannett.
Who's in Seattle or something like that?
Seattle.
The back of him?
I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a cut for me. I mean,
yeah,
he could use a good tight end. I think Rudolph is fine, especially now that he's signed that contract. I think he's playable, but I think he probably needs to find some sort of, even if it's just off of free agency or if it's just someone that's like, okay, he's a tight end, but he's not great. You want to have some sort of backup that will actually still score points.
It's interesting because when Hayden Hurst came out of the draft as a first rounder, I remember that Baltimore went tight ends. I think it was like the first and the third round with Mark Andrews sprinkled in there from Oklahoma. They're saying how Hayden Hurst was one of the older players in the draft at that time, which to take into consideration, was previously a baseball player, came over. I mean, I feel better about the tight end situation when it comes to, the fact that Rudolph is extended now. If he was still on that 1-year deal, I would have concern. But, I would look at this, look at the board for what Markov has. If depending on the direction and what he wants to go in, this is probably his biggest position of pressing need at the current moment of time.
Yeah, well, move on to linebackers. He's got Luke. How are you supposed to say his last name?
Kuechly? Kuechly.
Kuechly?
Kuechly.
I would want to hear. We shouldn't have said anything. I would want to hear how Markov pronounces it.
The John Cena of defensive
players. Darius Leonard, Bobby Wagner, Michael Kendricks, Mason Foster, Matt Milano, Todd Davis. I mean, Darius Leonard is insane. Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner is insane.
Still
his linebacker core is awesome.
And Mason Foster with Reuben Foster going down. If he's still in Washington, right? Mason Foster?
I believe so. Yeah.
I believe so. Yes.
Then I think he should come in if that's accurate.
Yeah.
And then Todd Davis.
He should be trading these linebackers away. I mean, he doesn't need all these.
So many.
He has 7.
Milano, I'm fine dropping. Kendricks, I'm not.
Milano was decent last year, but he didn't actually play he played a lot of downs, but he didn't play it as an inside linebacker. He was shifting between inside and outside, I think, for a lot of that. But he was on the field for a lot, so he's an okay acquisition. But with all these linebackers that he has, I would move.
He has some fuel to gain something. And you look at his D line loaded up on Cam Jordan, Calais Campbell, and D Ford. Insane D line as well.
Yep.
So this is where if he didn't have as strong of a defense, he would most likely be in rebuild mode. Right. But because of this, he's much closer to the line of competing.
Yep.
2 things to note. So Darius Leonard, Kuechly, Wagner, and who are we saying? Todd Davis are his big core 4, I would say, at linebacker at the current time. Shaq Thompson's an interesting name because I've seen him listed previously as a linebacker and a safety, so he's in that hybrid role. So if ESPN has Shaq Thompson listed as a safety, I think that's huge value for him to fill both roles in that aspect. The only thing about the defensive line that concerns me is Calais Campbell being 32 years old. I think he does have to start getting a little bit younger, but you can pick up somebody like off the waiver wire and go from there.
It's good to have these top offensive or defensive players rather, but in the end, some of these guys end up being replaceable just by guys off of free agency to me. The defensive backs, I'm sure some of those guys are probably decent, but I would never keep 4 defensive backs on my team. I would always have
3
the minimum, yeah, probably 3 just for bye weeks. But yeah, I mean, overall his team it's okay. I think he needs he needs to improve those wide receivers. He's got to find a way to get a good wide receiver, even if it's trading David Montgomery or trading, making some sort of package deal with one of those linebackers for a good receiver. I think he needs to lock down a wide receiver too.
Honestly, if I was Markov, I'd talk to Shane about dealing Benny Snell for his 1.12. I said smell.
I like Benny Smell better.
God damn it. No, but Benny Snell for his 1.12 because Shane's in win now mode. Get your handcuff running back and just enhance the value because I think Snell went in the third round.
Yeah, he went 3.4, I think is
3.4. So I think potentially to deal off, granted Snell's young. We don't know what to make of him just yet. I've heard rumors of a split backfield between Connor and Snell already from Pittsburgh camp. So
that would be interesting.
I think that could be a potential. I wouldn't say sell high or anything, but there's.
Would you say it's a smell high?
It's a smell high.
Boy. The other spot is on his QBs. Like I do like Brady and Rivers, but he needs to start preparing for the future in QB. So he needs to get a young stud QB sometime over the next year or two.
Yeah, if he can draft one or find a trade that involves one, it's not a bad idea because both of those guys will be irrelevant in fantasy in the next probably 3 or 4 years. So to start considering something like that.
I will say this: the one thing I will give Markov a lot of credit for is already in the 2020 draft, he has 3 second-round picks. So he's made some solid trades with the man over here, Mr. Kanzioka. And definitely is building his draft stock and draft value. It's a matter of which direction does he want to go in. Does he want to embrace the full rebuild?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would start the season, try and win. If it comes down to it and you end up not looking good, I'd be looking to move Tom Brady for a young quarterback. I'd be looking to move David Johnson for a bunch of draft picks next year or some young players, and T.Y. Hilton as well. I'd be looking to move those 3 guys, Tom Brady, David Johnson, T.Y. Hilton, once you get into the season, once you see where you're at, because those are guys that I think their value is highest right now. I think 2 years from now, you're going to wish you had traded them away.
What division's Markov in? What other teams are in his division?
He's in he's in the league with Mike Babetsky, Kevin Walsh, and Shane.
Okay. Yeah, that's I mean, Shane has an insane team. Kevin's rebuilding. And Babetsky, I think, is...
Mike's close.
Yeah. His team's actually...
And he'll make moves to compete.
Yeah. I think his team is actually good. So he probably has the 3rd best team in that division. I'd put him ahead of Walsh at this point.
So you have to figure Shane at minimum has a 2-year window. At minimum right now. Maybe even longer.
It can turn over
quick.
Yeah. I can't look past 2 years.
I mean, the injuries, of course, anything could happen though. But I think just based on looking at all 4 of those teams, Babetsky, Shane, and Walsh, who's now tanking everything and just embracing the full rebuild and making the switch. I think Markov does have an interesting choice to go in that division.
He's going to be either bubbling into the playoffs or bubbling out of it. And sometime mid-season, he's just got to make a decision what he wants to do.
I mean, to me, this team is not good enough to win a championship. There are a lot of things have to go right for him to win with this. And I just don't see him, if he gets in the playoffs, I don't see him beating some of these top teams. So
agreed.
I think you start the season, you get the best value out of your guys mid-season and trade.
Kuechly and Wagner, I could also see move to in a team desperate for a linebacker. I mean, Kuechly's now 27, Wagner's 28 years old.
Yeah,
they're getting towards that 30 mark where you might want to look to transition things and just start building between Milano, Todd Davis, and Darius Leonard as your linebacker.
I'd possibly try and sell Leonard right now. He's at his peak value. He can probably get a king's ransom for him.
His value is so high right now because he's a young linebacker. He's on the field the whole time. I think I could see either way. If he can get great value for Leonard, move him. If you're not getting what you want, I'd hold. It's his 2nd year in the league. He'll still be good when Matt's team is ready to compete in a couple years. I think I could see either way, but you want to make sure that you're selling for the right price. I'm surprised. I expected there to be more Pats on this team, and there are a lot of Pats on the team, but I love how he has Jacoby Brissett, who was on the Colts and the Pats. He's like, well, he was on both teams.
He'll be back on the Pats in the future, probably.
Probably, yeah.